Did you know Variety, the children's charity, is the entertainment charity started by a group of show business people who found an abandoned baby in a theatre way back in 1928. These kind-hearted performers raised so much money to help the lost child that they began helping other children, and Variety, the children's charity, was born. Read the full story and support the entertainers charity that supports kids in need today. Visit variety.org.au. You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
Joe White is the nice guy of stand-up comedy. Ethiopian born, Perth raised, Joe has quickly developed a loyal following both in Australia and around the world due to his great habits of giving before receiving and customising his comedy sets to his specific audience. In this School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast episode, you'll hear how Joe got started in comedy, how he's built up his Instagram followers to over 12,500, and the charities he supported around the world. And if you'd like to give, then get along to one of Joe White's Melbourne International Comedy Festival shows at the Afro Hub in North Carlton, titled Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry Part 2, from March 28 to April 22. And if that gives you the comedy bug and you want to try stand-up comedy for yourself, then get personally trained by veteran comic Christine Basil during our School of Hard Knock Knocks stand-up comedy course from April 22 to 26 in Melbourne. Now, here's the very generous and hilarious Joe White.
But if you look at my mum, she's got like 3 layers of traditional Ethiopian clothing, right, all year round. African hat. Can't take her to the movies because she blocks half of the screen. I don't want that kind of trouble. Every time I take her out for a drive, everything's just so fascinating to her. She acts like a tourist. We'll be driving along, she'll just go, "Oh, my son, oh, the trees very green. Oh, the road is so clean. Oh, the colors, how long the color's been here?" I'm like, "Mom, it's a traffic light, it's always been there."
Good morning, Joe. How are you, mate?
Good, Maury. How are you?
Oh, I'm very good, Joe. It's well, this is a phone call we're having, but I did sit down with you over coffee last week, which was fantastic because I haven't seen you for about almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years, yeah, since we last saw each other.
We last saw each other, and it's important for the listeners to know how we met each other.
Yeah.
Because we actually met as students, both of us, at a stand-up comedy course in Melbourne.
Yep. And, you stood out for me. So at the moment you messaged and said, "Hey, it's Maury, do you remember we met, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Of course, how can I forget?"
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because the grey hairs, the Colonel Sanders appearance.
Oh, true. And I think I made a joke in my final set that you and I make perfect opposing chess pieces.
That's it. That's also what stood out.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, fantastic, Joe. You've obviously gone on to great things since we last met. You've gone into comedy as a comedian and gone, you've gone international. We'll talk a little bit about your Canada trip as well. And I took the business route of comedy and got into stand-up comedy school myself. So it's interesting. We're coming back, and it's good to catch up with you because you have been very, very busy, both in person and also online in the cyber world. Because I looked at your Instagram following, and you have over 12,500 followers, which is incredible.
Thanks, Maury. Yeah, look, from what I've learned, obviously, we're still learning. But from what I've learned and what I've seen and the research I've done, and people that have come obviously before us and have done great things in comedy and entertainment, and the advice they've given and all that. So most of them, the pattern that I picked up is that you can't just be present in person, especially when social media plays a big part. So you also have to show your presence online, and to do. But I guess you want to put content that's that's good, that's going to get engagement, that's to do with the line of work that you're in. So once I figured out what I was trying to do and what brand I wanted to have and how I was going to go do it, then I started to obviously create content and also spend a lot of money on marketing. And that's also the other thing. Marketing is key to getting your brand out there. So that helps with
Well, for the listeners, what we'll do is later in this interview, I'm going to ask some specific tips and advice from you that the listeners can take away and maybe implement into their own social media strategy as well. But let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to today. You're in Melbourne, so am I, and you're here for the Melbourne International Comedy Festival because you've got your show, Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry. Is it part 2?
Yes, it's part 2. So last year I was here. I did 11 shows as part of the festival, and it was called Ethiopian and Not Hungry.
Great.
So Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry. So this one's Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry part 2. I just didn't want to lose the name. Like the name itself, it captures people's attention. I've noticed. It was also mentioned in Perth on 96 FM as one of the funniest names in the Fringe. So it's a really good name. It was really catchy when I took it over to North America as well. Everyone was just, they stopped to look at the post, they giggled, and then, they walked away or they bought tickets, but at least they stopped and looked and thought about it. So that's what you want. Title is very important, and the image on the poster is very important. So I'm doing part 2, which I toured Canada with. I'm doing it in Melbourne, and it's 26 shows that I'm doing, so one every night, starting on the 28th of March, and it's at Afro Hub, which is Carlton North, 727 Nicholson Street.
Afro Hub. So I'm assuming you'll be one of a few African people performing?
Yeah, look, that venue in itself is it promotes Afro talents, but it also promotes diversity. So I guess it's added into the festival. This is the second time the venue has been part of the festival, and they reached out the first time and they were looking for an Afro talent, a comedian, considering it's an international comedy festival. And I put my hand up. And we did great things last year. The Herald Sun came in and did a review. And one thing they mentioned was that, the diversity within the crowd that came. And, it was everyone from all over the world. You had all types of races, genders, age in that venue watching comedy. But I've got an MC. His name is Jason Wood. And then I've got myself as the headliner of my show. And I do 50 minutes and above. But one thing we like to do, myself and Jason, is that we give local talents the opportunity to shine as well. So we get them to jump up and do 5 minutes or so. Okay, great. And just see how they go.
Well, that's great. Well, you've tapped into probably the market of. I grew up. I'm a 75 model, and of course Ethiopia, the hungry title there obviously goes back to the Feed the World and Michael Jackson writing songs and so on. But I guess the millennials, do they even have a clue about the drought and the starvation that happened in that part of Africa back in the 80s?
I don't think they know it to the extent that you would probably know it or I would probably know it. But there is that stigma that's associated with Ethiopia, and there is that stereotyping. Ethiopians are hungry, so I've decided to make the title Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, well, it's a great title.
Bit of a wordplay.
It is a great
Thank you,
it is a great one. Well, good. Well, we'll definitely get along, and we'll get along to see one of those shows as you're performing for right through the festival. That's amazing. Now, when we had a chat the other day over coffee, I was amazed by the amount of research that you do when you do gigs. In particular, you were talking about your trip to Canada and Maximini. You were supporting Maximini throughout Canada, I believe. Is that right?
So Maximini is a Persian comic, but born and raised, I believe, in LA. International comedian, has nearly 200K followers on Instagram, and when he toured Australia, he does 1,000 seats per theatre. In Vancouver, he did 3,000 seats.
Jeez.
I didn't support him around Canada. However, I did support him around Australia, so I had to fly back from Canada to support him.
Yep.
And knowing that it was majority Persian crowd, so his show is all in English, but the majority, like 90% of his crowd are Persian.
Yep.
Going into it, obviously I'm being Ethiopian and possibly the only black guy in that building. I had to do a bit of research to build that rapport pretty quick with the crowd.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to do a good job, warm him up before he comes out. So I had about 15 minutes to do.
Yep.
And just researched, a bit about the Persian crowd, learned a bit about their dance, and nothing in depth. Just went on YouTube, spent 5-10 minutes looking at how Persians dance, and chose a really good popular song, and just attempted they appreciate the attempt.
Yeah,
not
right.
so much whether you got it 100% or not.
I've seen the video, and you come out, and I'm thinking to myself, that does not sound like Afro pop or Ethiopian music. It's very unusual. And then when I chatted with you over that coffee, and you explained it, it all made sense. And then in that same video that I saw, you actually engaged with the front row, and I think your first question was, "What do you do for a job?" "I bet you're an engineer." To which I think the answer was yes, and you just nailed the stereotype of the Persian employee here in Australia.
Yes, look, it's things like that. A lot of Persians know that a lot of Persians are engineers, doctors, or pretty much those two. And so, as an outsider, as an Ethiopian, to be on stage in majority Persian crowd and then call a Persian out for being an engineer, that's funny, because then they understand that that a lot of Persians, their stereotype, like, you've done your research, and they appreciate that, on top of the dance, and then the bit of not being scared of the crowd or intimidated, and the fact that you can have a quick banter. But most of the banter is researched already. I've done my research on the crowd, that's coming, and the type of,
great.
Who's most likely to be in the crowd. So engineers, doctors, dental people, that's it.
In terms of audience analysis, we had a graduate that we invited up to Wagga Wagga by the name of Gavin Ingham, and I hadn't seen his performances for a while, not since he graduated from the course. And he got up there in Wagga Wagga, and he was hilarious, because I think 3 of the main jokes that he had were very, very specific about Wagga Wagga. They were about one of the recent council members who got into a fight. It was about the beach, as they call it in Wagga Wagga. Wagga Wagga's landlocked, but the beach is near the river, and some other very, very local knowledge about Wagga Wagga, and the audience loved it, and I enjoyed it as well because of that fact. What would have happened if you go back to that Maximini story? If you had done no research on the Persians, the target audience that were there to see Maximini, to be fair, what would have happened if you just gone out there with your normal set and just performed?
Look, I think obviously you always got to have. It helps when you crowd banter, and it helps when it's relative to the crowd. Yeah. But when it's when you haven't done your research, it's a last minute thing. You have no idea what's happening. You just jump up and you perform. Then obviously, if you've got funny material, then that would work. Funny is funny, I guess, no matter where you perform it. As long as they understand the language you're performing it in, I guess.
Sure.
But if you've done your research, it complements it. It's the icing on the cake. So if you've done your research on the crowd and you have funny material, they'll laugh 10 times harder.
Yeah,
but if you haven't done your research and you just do your material, if your material's funny, they'll still laugh. So it'll still be a good day.
Right.
But it obviously complements it when you do your research.
Yeah, right. Well, it's, you obviously, I've seen that set and they love you, and you can almost feel the warmth immediately. It's like they accept you as one of them immediately.
Yeah, look, every culture appreciates the effort that one, or if you're an outsider, being involved somehow, some way within that culture, and you've done your research, they respect you, and they don't put their guard down 100%, but they do put it down a little bit and give you that opportunity. So if your material is not as funny as you thought, but you've done your research and you do some references to the area, the crowd, or the venue, then even if your material is not as funny, they've let their guard down a little bit, and they sort of like you because, you put in the effort. I guess you can get away with it,
Yeah, right. And talking about being an outsider, so here you are, an Ethiopian Australian who went to Canada. I believe you did about just over 30 shows right across Canada. Yeah,
if you include all the gigs around town, the open mic nights, the semi-pro nights, the solo shows, then it would be up there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and
so tell me a bit about that experience. So, as an up and coming comedian, you're not yet a household name in Australia. So, I'm assuming in Canada you're not a household name, or prove me wrong. How did you get 30 shows during that period? What were some of the techniques to getting a gig?
The rule applies. I think no matter where you go, the same rule applies, and you just have to be, if you're a genuine person, like if you're a nice person and you put yourself out there, and not only do you work hard, but you also, you respect others, you put your name forward, you request a gig, you go as far as emailing, Facebook messaging, showing up to clubs and requesting to speak to someone who organizes the gig and see if there's any opportunities for you to jump up or even come back at a different time. And even if you're not on, still going down to the venue and just watching and saying g'day and, having a chat and seeing what you could learn and helping out where you can, not just only if they let you up, but just doing a bit more than what they expect of you. That always helps. And making friends. I went over there without knowing anyone or having any friends or anything. So I put myself out there, and when I got up, the opportunity came when I got up on stage and performed, and people will come up to you afterwards, say, hey, great set, what's your name, blah, blah, blah. And there was just one lead. You follow one lead, you go to another and another and another. Before you know it, you've got opportunities coming left, right, center, because they go, hey, that kid's a good performer, that kid's a nice guy, or, I want to hang out with Joe and show him around Canada or Montreal. I had people that were, giving me, driving me around or showing me places, that outside comedy, just being my friends, genuinely, because, I put myself out there and I treated them with respect and, and gave them that hospitality, I guess.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So you literally got on an aeroplane, flew over, didn't know anyone, started from zero, but then built 30 shows out of that, just being nice and making connections. Yeah,
absolutely. I did solo show in Toronto and a completely solo show in Montreal. Yep. And, I had fun. It wasn't easy, I can assure you that. I do get nowadays, I still get messages on Facebook, just in my private messages, just asking me for advice on if someone was to put on a show, what they would do to get bums on seats, I guess. And a lot of it, it's, you find the venue, go check out the venue, make sure it's got the numbers that you're after in terms of seating capacity, and then print out your posters, get the artwork done, flyer, put posters out, go do gigs, fly after gigs, say g'day to the crowd, I guess, when you're done gigging, thank them for coming, and if they enjoyed your show, to come to, have that little quick chat, because that helps. That quick chat is what they remember sometimes. And they go, you know what, he was a nice guy, I'm going to go check him out. So sometimes that helps. They come because they like you as a person, and then they really enjoy your material, and next time you're in town, they already follow you on Facebook and they bring their mates. And that's how it grows. You don't just end up at a theatre or an arena overnight.
Yeah. I see quite a few open micers, for example, they hide in the back. I mean, fair enough, they're preparing, they're a bit scared, they're a bit nervous, but they hide in the back. They don't network with people during the pre-drinks. And then when the show's over or there's an interlude, they disappear. They're gone. I'm like, well... how are we going to know who you are if you don't introduce us? Maybe it's that world that we live in today, the cyber world, where because we're so bombarded with Facebook requests, Instagram messages, some people think that's the only way to communicate, and they've forgotten about that face-to-face relationship that's still probably the most important.
Yeah, look, the hustle is different in Australia compared to Canada, and sometimes it makes sense in Canada for comics not to hang back after their set, only because, like, for example, in Perth, which is where I started, after a set, I would hang back and watch the rest of the show and have a chat, congratulate people on some techniques that I saw that I really liked, and see if the headliners have any, like, I'm a Perth boy, so when headliners fly in, I don't mind driving them to certain places or different gigs if they got to go here or there, or just show them a bit of hospitality when they're in my city. That's how I see it, and through that I've made really good friends, which is great. So in Canada it was different from what I've seen there. Like, for example, in Perth, you will do one gig a night. Sometimes two, if you're really, really lucky. If it's really, really busy, you'll do 2 gigs a night. In Toronto, we were doing, 4 gigs a night.
Wow.
So sometimes you'd have to do 1 gig, and then you've only got 10, 15 minutes to get to your next gig. And this is very common, and the promoters are very understanding, and they know it's part of the grind,
Yeah, wow.
When I was in Montreal, I was hearing Ali Wong give a speech at the JFL festival, and one of her speeches was that she used to do 9 gigs a night in New York.
Wow.
So imagine that. She did 9 gigs a night, and in Perth you struggle to do 2.
Well, it's probably to do with the population, but Canada only has, I think it's about 30 million people, so it's not double Australia. So what makes Toronto so much more popular, or is there a lack of comedians or more rooms?
There's more rooms, and I guess the demand is there.
Yep.
In Perth, I can't speak for Melbourne because I'm not a Melbourne boy, but in Perth, there's a lack of comedy rooms, especially open mic rooms. Some open, but they don't last long. In Toronto, there's so many of them, and the demand is there. The stage is there. Sometimes you may get 2 people, 3 people, but if you're on stage and you're trying to have a good time with 2 people, 3 people, that brings out this side of you that you have to relax in order to execute a good performance in front of 2 people. You have to be relaxed, and you can't just do material. You got to have a bit of a chat and sort of make them part of your routine. And that really makes your stage performance 10 times better and your stage presence 10 times better. And you usually know when there is an outsider from Canada that comes to Perth, like you just see them perform and you're like, wow, that person's really comfortable on stage.
Yeah, wow.
Not necessarily funnier, but maybe comfortable on stage.
Yeah. It might be the hours that they've done, the actual stage time, which
Absolutely.
Compared to, because as you say, they can get 2 shows a night at least, maybe even more. Well, let's go talk about your fans, and you've got 12,500 of them on Instagram from last count. So you travel around the world. I'm assuming that a lot of these fans aren't just in Australia and they're not just in Perth. They're all over.
No, they're all over.
Yeah. What's some of the techniques for people listening to this podcast who are just getting started in stand-up, or maybe some of the older stand-up comedians who have put a lot of their time into Twitter, which is still relatively popular, but not as popular as Instagram for the new generation? What can they do to generate that buzz and get to what you've got over 12,500?
Look, overseas, Twitter is, I feel like Twitter is a lot bigger than Instagram and Facebook and such. And so I'm trying to grow my Twitter followers, but it's not going as well.
Right.
But I'm, I very rarely post on Twitter, so I should probably just increase the amount of times I post there.
Yep.
When it comes to Instagram, just like any other, I guess, page, just content, I upload as much as you can, a lot of stuff, but also make sure it's stuff that people are willing to watch and share. And sometimes when I post, I collaborate with people, and then they share it on their page and they give me credit. Sometimes I hit up pages that are, Ethiopian pages, and, considering that I'm a Ethiopian performer, doing something that not many Ethiopians are doing in the Western world.
No.
They share some of my stuff as well, and I get a lot of Ethiopian followers that follow me. But really, it's just being active, engaging, increasing your activity and being engaging on social media. And like I said, spending money on marketing.
Because you do a lot of videos, a lot of funny videos as well.
Yeah.
So how often do you release a new little video on Instagram or YouTube?
Everyone's different. I don't do it as much as I should and as much as I would like to. When I have shows and stuff coming up, I try to do it once every 2 days or once every week. I try to release a video, if not a sketch, if not of me doing a sketch, one of me on stage telling a joke. But it's hard, obviously, because you don't want to release something bad, because people will just go, oh, he's not funny, I'm not going to the show. And you're like, no, this is my old stuff. My new stuff is 10 times better. But
that's a problem.
And at the same time, you want to release your best joke. But if you do, then, when you do it at your show, it's like you're doing stuff they've already seen. So you're in this, tug of war of not knowing what to do. But I say, look, any content is better than no content. But just make sure that it's not a terrible one, because that would do more damage than good.
Well, I can tell you, I've known Ben Horowitz for 3 years, and I see him perform. He's the MC for all of the Melbourne-based courses that we do, and I've heard his cat stories more than 20 times at least. But I still laugh because he just gets so involved in the story that you just can't help but be absorbed, even though you know what the ending is going to be. So
Yeah, Ben's awesome. It's just, I think it's that look on his face. It's just, he's got this look on his face when he tells the joke.
It's a dopey look, isn't it? It's kind of like, duh.
And he makes fun of it, referencing his days as a boxer. That's what makes it even funnier.
Yeah,
I laugh just before he starts talking. That's how funny I find Ben Horowitz.
He is good. Yeah, well, again, he was your guest comedian, wasn't he, when you and I did the course, way back, 2013 or 14? Yeah, or somewhere around there.
A while back, yeah. So when he did that guest appearance, I was just like, oh, man, I'm never going to be better than this guy.
Yeah. Well, we have that conversation all the time. Well, yeah, we have that conversation all the time about how he sees a lot of the graduates, not talking about yourself specifically, but speaking about the alumni from the actual School of Hard Knocks course. And the other day, there was a poster with Stevie Sticks as the headline title, and then a couple of other support acts, and little writing, and MC Ben Horowitz. And Ben was like, well, I guess, the grasshopper has become the master. Ben, you run a training school. That's the intention. You want people to be successful. Yeah.
Trust Ben not to get shitty about it and just, make fun of it and have a good laugh, because that's what comedy is, man. I read, I think it was an Oscar Wilde quote where it said, or Shakespeare, I don't know, where it said, comedy is tragedy misunderstood. And that made sense, whatever something goes wrong, you just look for the funny side. There's always one, and I think if you're Ben, you will always find a funny side to anything that happens.
That's for sure. Yeah, that guy, Ben, has endured a lot over his life. And if you know his comedy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So he's had some tough times in his life for sure. But he's, he gets through it with a stiff upper lip and a good joke to boot. Well, we are talking a little bit about my next question, which is a good segue about giving back, and Ben is doing that. He gives a lot of time, a lot of free time to the graduates, the alumni of the school, and you also give back as well. I know that you've done a lot of, for example, I think last year when you were at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, you actually did one show and all the money went to charity. Yeah, look, every time I do a show, I like to get involved with a charity and donate. And last year we did 10 shows as part of the festival, and then the 11th show we did was for charity, and we raised $1,900 just one night, and that went to Friends of the Hudad. And what they do at the time when they reached out, they were building a school in Ethiopia and needed funds to complete it. So I said, why not? Let's do a show for you. And we did that, and it was great. I mean, I use and also in Canada. The show that I did in Toronto, we raised money and donated it to the Canadian Cancer Society. In Perth, last year we raised $1,000 through one of our free shows and donated it to the Katina Woodruff Children's Foundation. And this year we donated $1,500 to them as well. And they help kids traumatic immigration experience to Australia transition into the Australian way of life, which is great. Kids are innocent, so anything we could do to help, that was what we did. I always say, comedy is a tool that I use to empower my humanitarian side. My humanitarian side is what helps me sleep at night, not my comedy. Not people that pat me in the back and said, "Mate, I laugh, thank you." It's more the good that I do that helps me sleep at night. So. Oh, that's amazing. Well, that comes to a good wrap-up then. So I guess if people want to support you and your humanitarian efforts and also have a laugh and pat you on the back and say, good, you made me laugh, you can have that. I'm not an all guy, I'm an and guy, Joe. Yeah. Then they can get along to your show, Ethiopian and Still Not Hungry Part 2. Tell us again where it is and the dates?
Yeah, so it's Ethiopian Still Not Hungry Part 2 at the Afro Hub venue, which is 727 Nicholson Street, and it kicks off Wednesday next week, the 28th of March, and it's every night until the 22nd of April. If you come during the week to the shows, it's $15 per ticket. If you come on the weekend, it's $20 per ticket. But either way, we're going to have a great laugh, and I look forward to seeing which charity we'll be supporting in this festival.
Perfect. Well, Joe, fantastic. It was great to catch up with you last week. It's good again to catch up with you right now and talk a bit more about comedy and your passion and your travels and how you match your comedy to your audience and, of course, giving back, which you just described. Thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on stage as an audience member, though, this time.
Thank you, buddy, for having me on, and as always, great catching up.
Excellent. See you, Joe.
See you, buddy.